Populist Party. You don't know what that is. Wanted government ownership of railroads. So it's, here's the question, here's the answer. Okay? That's how that works. All right, so make sure you read this over a couple times before you get to this class, because we're going to start this immediately. All right, when we get in. Why? Because it's not really that. Really not that important for you. All right. Okay, here's what we have. Efforts at Reconstruction, that's in the grades. I put that in. It's already graded and everything else. So, the one thing about this question is some people, you had to really say, what's the relationship, number one, between, the percentage of the slave population and secession. All right, and that the higher the slave population, the greater the chance of the state seceding from the Union. Okay, and that not every the ones with the lowest slave populations they didn't secede or just barely seceded. Okay, also with one of the questions here we dealt with Lincoln, you got to use a direct quote. We still had to answer the question. All right, notice right here, you don't have to turn anything in here. This is for November 16th, it's your flashcards, or your note cards that I want done. Now, I'm not going to have another test 2 in a row. So on Wednesday, we'll probably have a evaluation where you can use these cards, and this is the tough thing about you guys coming here. You bring your cards with you. Well, some of you have, I would, and it's going to be or no, but it's going to be a vocabulary test on forms, okay, multiple choice. So, anyway, any of these things can go, even if we haven't talked about it yet, okay? So
wait, so we just put them on normal flashcards, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know how to do that. You're putting everything you can right, like George McClellan. He was a, Union general. He was a West Point graduate. He was an enemy of Lincoln politically. He was a Northern Democrat. He was in charge of the Battle of Antietam, but his troops loved him. He's credited for training the Union Army, but then Lincoln was mad at him because he didn't pursue Lee after the Battle of Antietam. And eventually McClellan quit the Army and ran against Lincoln on a peace platform. I mean, do you think any of our generals like Petraeus wants this deal with the Taliban?
No.
No way. I mean, I once, some teachers here were talking about a guy I used to work with, and his name was Bruce Kelly. He's a real war hero. Shot down 3 times in Vietnam. And a lot of people have gone to Vietnam because it's a great tourist destination and people that go there love it and all that. And a lot of Vietnam vets have gone to Vietnam on vacation or whatever. And so I asked, Mr. Kelly, Bruce Kelly, I said, do you ever thought about going back to Vietnam? And he goes, the way I'd go back there is in flying a B-52 bomber with like hydrogen bombs. Whoa. So anyway. But this is, the vocabulary, so don't forget that. All right, this is what we're looking, this was turned in yesterday, the Civil War map. Why these are still people who got these out, I'm going to put these in today. All right, but I do want to check them, all right? And then this is what we're doing today, Fort Sumter. All right, so, and yesterday we had the Khan Academy, secession of Fort Sumter. So I'm going to turn this thing on now, and sign it, okay? All right, so here it is. And I'll just leave this right here in the line. So what I want to play is this, a Fort Sumter animated battle video. And then I'm going to show you something else about the Civil War battles, and then you get the rest of the time to work on this. Let me just show you what this is. This is from Stanford Education Group. These are good source documents. This is a document-based question, all right? And but it's not an ACE question really. Okay, so what it has is two documents based on newspaper reports at the time, and one is from Ohio, and one is from Virginia, North and South. All right, on the same date, I believe, right? April 13th, so this is not like 7 years later. And those are your documents, and this is what you're gonna write on, okay? So a lot of it's very simple and short. It's the document-based questions as it comes up. And one is just, when was this article published? Where was the article published? These are things that can really help you on, looking at your documents on the ACE exam. And then these questions here, just, answering it, how the article's described. So there's document A, or report A, and here's report B. Okay, so this is due on Monday. All right, and Monday after the quiz, you'll be able to work on this, okay? If you need to, all right? So let's look at this Battle of Fort Sumter here in this animated thing. Where you read the article. You guys should be able to watch this.
Even before the Civil War, the nation was divided, North and South. Slavery was at the heart of issues involving economics, politics, and sexual power. These issues were
Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah. Got a Bible in one hand.
Young
One in the
Donald
other.
Trump.
There's a tornado.
Oh, John Brown.
Very good.
Dude, I was close.
available in the halls of Congress, at Harper's Ferry, and elsewhere. The slave labor of the agricultural South was the fuel that drove the region's economy. The industrial North was driven by a manufacturing-based economy. This diversity helped fan the flames of secession and would have significant impact on the coming war. The presidential election of 1860 proved to be the final spark that tore the country apart. Nominees Stephen Douglas and John C. Breckinridge represented the North and South respectively. The Constitutional Union Party sent John Bell as their candidate, with Abraham Lincoln as the Republican Party's nominee. Lincoln's anti-slavery views were seen by many Southerners as a direct threat to their way of life. Therefore, when Abraham Lincoln won the election of 1860, Southern states were outraged. On December 20th, 1860, South Carolina seceded from the Union. 6 other states soon followed, forming the Confederate States of America. With the Union dissolved, civil war was inevitable.
I said yeah.
By March 1861, nearly all the forts and naval yards of the Second States had been seized by the new government. Charleston Harbor was among a handful of coastal strongholds that remained in federal possession. When South Carolina seceded from the Union, there were 3 U.S. fortifications in Charleston Harbor. Castle Pinckney was built in 1810 to provide for.
All right, so right here, if you ever go to Charleston, which you should, I think, at some point, has anyone been to Charleston?
I might have actually.
Yes, Charleston. Okay.
Where's
Well,
Charleston?
that's the danger of traveling when you're too young. You can't remember.
Charleston.
But the Ashley and Cooper River.
Oh, I think I've been there.
This is a really high bridge that was scary. Now it's a newer bridge, which isn't scary to go over. You remember that big iron bridge? Terrifying.
No.
It's like 2 lanes.
Yeah,
Oh, actually, I know what you're talking about.
and it's like over that like.
It goes right from the city, like right over
I have no
here.
idea what you're talking about.
It's like it's like not
Give me
there's
that,
water,
give me
but
that.
then there's like grassland.
Yeah,
Oh,
but it's a scary bridge.
2 lanes, and it
Dude
feels like
lives in
you're
it.
on there for forever.
And it's been replaced though.
Really?
Yeah, it's been replaced. So yeah, it's got a newer
Oh, it's
bridge,
really
like a span bridge.
Yes.
But this is where all the people sort of vacation over here on Sullivan's Island. But, you know, if you go to Charleston and go down here to this is a colonial city, you know, you can see Fort Sumter in the distance.
For inner harbor defense. By 1860, it was in need of major repair, and its garrison consisted of only 2 people, a widowed sergeant and his teenage daughter. Fort Moultrie, first built in 1776, with succeeding forts built on the same site, was completed in 1809. With 50 cannon mounted, it served as the major fortification to defend Charleston Harbor until the beginning of the war. Fort Sumter was an imposing sight. Sitting on a man-made island, the brick fort was 90% complete in 1860 and the most defensible fortification in Charleston Harbor. In November 1860, Major Robert Anderson assumed command of U.S. fortifications in Charleston Harbor.
Now, Robert Anderson was U.S. Army irregular. He was a West Point graduate, high in his class, but he was from Kentucky, which was a what type state? Slave state, and it was a border state too, right? So slave state, and he came from slave-owning, you know, people, but he was loyal to the Union.
Headquartered at Fort Moultrie. Soon after South Carolina seceded, Major Anderson moved his command of 85 officers and men to Fort Sumter under cover of darkness. Fort Sumter was the safest and most defensible position he could hold against attack, with a number of men and supplies at hand. Charlestonians were outraged, and within a few days, South Carolina militia had seized all federal property in the area except Fort Sumter.
Okay, so South Carolina militia, which we call the National Guard now, took these other Union sites, but they and some of these, you know, places were actually manned by people in the surrounding areas, so, you know, it's pretty easy to take them.
They occupied Castle Pinckney and seized Fort Moultrie. In defiance of the federal presence in Charleston Harbor, the Southerners rebuilt batteries and constructed new fortifications on Sullivan's Island, on Morris Island, and on James Island. When Anderson and his troops first entered Fort Sumter, the fort was far from complete. For 3 months, Anderson prepared Fort Sumter for combat. By April 12th, however, fewer than half the needed cannon were ready, and even these lacked soldiers to man them. As the federal strength in Sumter, Confederate forces could be seen building batteries and mounting cannons along the harbor shore. 43 Southern cannon were trained on Fort Sumter, and more than 3,500 Confederate.
All right, so here's some photographs that you see of these sort of battery cannons. These are much larger than you find on the battlefield. And they're basically naval artillery guns. So
Confederate soldiers manned Charleston Harbor defense. Anderson was running low on provisions, and in January, a federal relief ship left New York with supplies for Fort Sumter. When the Star of the West appeared at the entrance to Charleston Harbor, cadets from Charleston's elite Citadel Military Academy opened fire upon the unarmed ship. The Star of the West turned back without reaching the fort.
all right, so the Citadel, I mentioned that yesterday. The Citadel is a military school in Charleston. It's still there today, and it just shows you the military tradition of the upper class South, and where the planter class, your first son would be would take over the plantation. The second son would be planned. They would have a military career. If they were rich, they were going to be an officer. The third son was going to be in the clergy, Church of England, of course. And so, or Anglican Church. That was the plan. It sort of goes the English way of what you're expected to do. Just like if any of your parents own the business, the eldest kid, now it's even, the female kid, is sort of expected to at least offer to take it over, or will be asked to.
By April of 1861, Major Robert Anderson was in a tight fix. Confederates surrounded Fort Sumter and were expected to attack at any time. To avoid war, the Confederate government ordered General P.G.T. Beauregard to demand the evacuation of Fort Sumter.
All right, so Beauregard, he's a West Pointer too, and he was a student of Anderson. They knew each other and they were like on friendly terms. Of course, you know, if you go to school with someone, you like them. Even if you can't stand someone right now, in 10 years from now, if you go, oh, I went to Jupiter High, I remember you, you'll be friends, believe me. All right, so that's Beauregard. He was from Louisiana. And this guy's background was questionable, by the way. You know, was he part African? Was he, you know, to the Southerners? He was from New Orleans. There was a mixed group in New Orleans called Creoles. He certainly was dark in complexion and everything else. But he was a Confederate officer. He survived the war, and after the war, he was a major planner in New Orleans for their light rail system, electric trolley system. Because a lot of West Point graduates were engineers by trade. I mean, they were trained as engineers.
And it refused to reduce it. His aides visited Fort Sumter twice under flag of truce and presented Anderson with the ultimatum, but without success. At 4:30 a.m. on April 12th, a shot fired from Fort Johnson on James Island burst over Fort Sumter and signaled the Confederate batteries in Charleston Harbor to commence an assault on the fort. The Civil War had begun. At daybreak, Union forces opened fire in response. Charlestonians watched as the bombardment of the fort continued for 34 hours. During the second day of the battle, artillery fire from Fort Moultrie set parts of Fort Sumter on fire. With so few men, Anderson could not fight the fire and the Confederates at the same time. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, arrangements were made for Anderson to surrender the fort. On April 14, 1861, after a 50-gun salute to the U.S. flag, Anderson and his men withdrew to New York aboard a Union supply ship. Shortly after, Confederate forces occupied Fort Sumter, with photographers.
You see this photographer here. There's a primary source. This is the Confederate flag. That's what it looked like. Not the stars and bars that you are used to, but this is the political flag with 7 stars. Remember, 11 states seceded, but there were 7 states that seceded before Fort Sumter, and 4 more came after. So there's the 7 stars. And that's not a cannonball flag. That's just something in the picture. Now, the U.S. flag that was brought down from Fort Sumter, that's one of the most famous flags in U.S. history. It's called the Anderson flag. And according to Marco Thomas, who went there to this fort, he said that original flag is at the museum of the fort.
Right behind.
No problem.
For the next 4 years, Fort Sumter became a symbol for the South. It was sacred ground where the first shot in the war for Southern independence was fired. For the North, Fort Sumter symbolized secession and disloyalty. U.S. Navy ships formed a blockade to keep Southern cargo vessels from using Charleston's port. On April 7, 1863, the war returned when 9 federal gunboats attacked Fort Sumter and Fort Moultrie. After 2.
Okay, you see a real change in shipping. Now, this video doesn't give you too many pictures of ships. This is after 1863 because these are called ironclads, no sails, steam powered only. This is like a pretty simple type design where you got guns all around. You can only fire one side, and you turn and fire with these cannons. These are called monitor class. This is from the USS Monitor. We're going to be learning about these next week. And these are on 360-degree turrets that can, go around. And this is almost like a cheesecake, factory thing. It's like a cheese thing on a platter. But these were used on rivers. Now, the original Monitor actually sunk in a storm off North Carolina in 1863, I think, and it was lost, and then the underwater salvors sort of found it. It was in 260 feet of water. We were thinking about raising it, but if they did, the iron would just oxidize and fall apart. So it's a military grave. I think somebody did die in what it said.
2.5 hours, the artillery duel was over, leaving the Federals without their prize. For the next 20 months, Union forces bombarded Fort Sumter in an attempt to force surrender.
These are famous black troops of the 54th Massachusetts that fought at Sullivan Island in South Carolina. And by the way, something, I'll just say this now, because we're not going to be on the Civil War that long, next week and a little bit of the week after, that any black soldier, there's Robert Anderson, he's a white officer, he's getting shot here, I guess, that if you're a black person in the Union Army and you were captured alive by the Confederates, what do you think they did to you?
Kill you.
Yeah, they were executed.
Isn't that when they whipped them?
Huh?
Isn't that when they whipped them? Or like they had like a special death sentence with them?
I don't know if they shot him or what.
I think they hang spies.
It's okay. The Cowboys are there when I say too anyway, so.
They didn't lynch these. They killed them with military execution, but they were killed, and that's illegal in war. You cannot kill prisoners. It goes. This is before the Geneva, but you never kill prisoners. You paroled them, but they were killed, and that's one reason why Lincoln was sort of going, you better not kill these guys, because if you are killing them, we're going to come after you after the war, and the blacks knew that. That's why they didn't get taken prisoner too often. They fight to the death. Why? Because they knew that was happening.
They tried amphibious landings, but without success. Union attacks had a devastating effect upon Fort Sumter, with walls crumbling and cannons dismounted. By late 1863, it resembled a giant pile of rubble. Finally, as the war's end neared, Fort Sumter was evacuated on April 14, 1865. Anderson came out of retirement to raise the U.S. flag once again over Fort Sumter.
Here's a photograph that shows the Anderson flag. Pretty big flag.
The war was over.
Okay, one thing I do before you get the rest of the time here is I want to show you something here. This is not on your screen, so make sure that you're looking at this one up here on the screen. This is from another class, but
How do I see his English?
it's something about the weaponry of the Civil War. Now, this class, or this, your syllabus isn't too concerned about weaponry or anything, but we are going to have a graded essay in here, and it is possible that, ACE might have this as one of your questions. Why did the Civil War last so long? And that's when you're going to talk about weapons and tactics and generals. All right? So, this is a little bit about, the weapons.
Many thanks to the Great Forces Plus for sponsoring this primary sources for American history. How would you answer? Many would impulsively respond with the Second World War or even Vietnam. However, this is simply untrue. The American Civil War